There is a forest in central India where the rules of the wild are not what you would expect, where the animal that holds the highest rank is not the one with the largest body or the sharpest teeth or the most fearsome roar, where a predator that has no business winning does exactly that, over and over again, not because it is stronger, but because it refuses to stop. If you have ever wondered what pure collective will looks like in the animal kingdom, what happens when a group decides that size does not matter and numbers do not lie, then you need to watch what unfolds in the next few minutes. Because what happened here, on 2 consecutive days, in the same patch of Indian forest, is one of the most remarkable sequences of predator behavior ever recorded in the wild. A Bengal tiger was driven off a fresh kill, and then it came back the following morning and was driven off again. Not by another tiger, not by a larger predator, by dholes, wild dogs that barely reach a tiger's knee. If you want to see more stories like this, stories where the animal world breaks every rule you thought you knew, then stay with us. Hit subscribe and keep watching, because what comes next will change the way you think about power in the wild. The forest of central India is not a quiet place. It never has been. The canopy here is thick and layered, a tangle of teak and sal and bamboo that catches the light in the morning and holds the heat in the afternoon and becomes something else entirely after dark. The understory is dense with the sounds of life pressing up against itself, spotted deer moving through clearings, langur monkeys sending alarm calls, rippling through the trees like a stone dropped in still water, and beneath all of it, deeper and older than any of the individual sounds, the constant low hum of competition. Every animal here is both hunter and hunted at some level. Every meal is contested. Every territory is a temporary arrangement between ambition and capability. And at the very top of this system, or so it would seem, sits the Bengal tiger. There is almost nothing in this landscape that challenges the tiger directly. It is the largest cat on earth. An adult male can weigh over 250 kilograms. Its body is built like a compression engine, all coiled muscle and dense bone, designed to take down prey that outweighs it considerably. A single swipe from a tiger's forepaw can kill. Its jaws can crush the spine of a gaur, which is one of the largest bovines alive on the planet. It hunts alone, it kills alone, and when it has made a kill, it eats alone. The concept of sharing is not a tiger's concept. It is simply not part of the architecture of how this animal thinks or operates. So when we talk about what happened in this particular forest, in this particular stretch of scrub and sal woodland that runs along the edges of one of India's great tiger reserves, we have to understand what the tiger represents before we can understand what it means that a pack of dholes made it leave. Not once, twice, on consecutive days, with the same kill. We have to understand what is being overturned here, and why it matters. The dhole is not an animal that announces itself the way the tiger does. There is no thunderous roar. There is no visual drama of great striped flanks moving through undergrowth. The dhole is, in most physical respects, modest. It stands roughly the height of a medium-sized domestic dog. An adult weighs somewhere between 12 and 20 kilograms, depending on sex and condition. Its coat is a rusty reddish-brown across the back and sides, fading to lighter tones on the belly and throat. Its tail is bushy and dark-tipped, and its ears are large and rounded, which gives it an alert, almost delicate expression that is entirely at odds with what it is capable of. What the dhole has, in quantities that are hard to fully describe, is coordination. Not the loose coordination of animals that happen to be moving in the same direction. Genuine, sophisticated, dynamic coordination of the kind that turns a collection of small bodies into something that functions as a single adaptive organism. A dhole pack hunts as a unit. It communicates constantly, through a vocabulary of whistles and whines and body postures that scientists are still working to fully decode. Pack members know where the others are at all times. They know when to push and when to hold back. They know how to rotate pressure so that the target never gets a moment of rest. And they know, with what appears to be genuine collective intelligence, how to assess and respond to a threat that no individual member of the pack could handle alone. The pack in question had been ranging through this part of the forest for several weeks. There were 11 of them, a number that represents a fairly typical pack size for dholes in this habitat. Packs can be smaller, sometimes as few as 5 or 6, but the most successful packs, the ones that consistently take large prey and hold their own against other carnivores, tend to number in the double digits. 11 is enough to divide and coordinate. 11 is enough to be everywhere at once. 11 is more than enough to make a tiger uncomfortable. The tiger was a large adult female. She had been resident in this territory for several years. and was well known to the researchers and field staff who monitored movement in the area. She was not old. She was in her prime, physically robust, an experienced hunter with a long and well-documented kill record that included sambar, chital, wild boar, and at least one recorded kill of a gaur calf. She was, by any measure, exactly what a Bengal tiger is supposed to be, a dominant apex predator in full command of her territory. She had made her kill in the late afternoon of the first day. The prey was a large sambar stag, an adult male with considerable body mass, the kind of animal that represents a substantial investment of energy for a tiger to take down, and also a substantial reward in terms of meat. A kill of this size would feed her for days. Tigers typically do not consume an entire kill at once. They feed, rest, feed again, and may return to a large carcass multiple times over 2 or 3 days, dragging it into dense cover between feeding bouts to keep it concealed from scavengers. This is the rhythm of a large solitary predator's relationship with its prey. Kill big, feed long, move slowly between bouts. She had fed through the late afternoon and into the early evening. The carcass was in a relatively open section of the forest, near a dry stream bed that offered some natural cover at its edges, but left a good deal of the surrounding area visible. She had pulled the sambar partially into the stream bank vegetation, enough to break up its outline from a distance, but not so concealed that she couldn't access it quickly when she wanted to return. She had moved off perhaps 50 meters into denser cover to rest during the hotter part of the day. This is typical behavior. Tigers often leave a kill and rest nearby, returning to feed in the cooler hours. The Dholes arrived at the carcass mid-morning of the following day. The scent of fresh blood and open viscera carries a considerable distance in forest air, particularly after a warm night. The pack had been moving on an easterly bearing through the forest, and the smell found them. There was a brief pause in their movement, the kind of coordinated stillness that a pack of dholes exhibits when it is processing information collectively, and then they oriented toward the source. They moved in fast, low, and very quiet. Dholes on the approach to something significant are not noisy animals. The whistling and chattering that characterizes their normal social communication drops away. They become focused in a way that is almost eerie to observe. They found the carcass. They also found the tiger. She had returned to the kill perhaps an hour before the dholes arrived, resuming her feeding in the cool of the morning. When the first dhole emerged from the undergrowth at the edge of the streambed clearing, she was lying across the haunches of the sambar, actively feeding. She raised her head, her ears came forward. The posture was unmistakable, a predator encountering a challenge it was not yet sure how to classify. One dhole is not a threat to a tiger. 2 dholes are not a threat to a tiger. Even 3 or 4 dholes, which can be bold and aggressive in their own right, represent a manageable nuisance at best for an animal of the tiger's power. The tiger knows this. The dhole knows this too, which is why a single dhole does not challenge a tiger. The dhole's strategy is not about individual courage. It is about mathematics. The pack did not rush the tiger all at once. That is important to understand. A coordinated frontal charge by 11 dholes would certainly be dramatic, but it is not how dholes actually operate when they are displacing a large predator from a resource. What they do is something more sophisticated and, in its own way, more unnerving for the animal on the receiving end. They spread out. 3 dholes moved to the left, angling around the edge of the clearing in a wide arc that placed them beyond the tiger's direct line of sight, but within the range of her peripheral vision. 2 more moved right, also wide, also circling. The remaining 6 held their position at the edge of the stream bed, visible, close enough to be significant but not rushing. Not yet. The tiger turned her head, tracking the movement to her left, turned back. Tracked the movement to her right. She rose to her feet, standing over the carcass. Her tail was low. Her ears, which had been forward and alert, began to shift. She was reading the geometry of the situation. A tiger can hold its ground against any single threat in this forest. Against a distributed, coordinated, mobile threat that is simultaneously approaching from multiple directions, the calculation becomes different. She charged one of the dholes. This is the tiger doing what tigers do, applying direct explosive force to eliminate one element of the problem. The dhole she charged ran. Of course it ran. A dhole is not going to stand still for a tiger charge. It bolted fast and low through the undergrowth, easily outpacing her over any distance, because the dhole is significantly faster than the tiger at a sustained run. And while she was focused on that individual, while her momentum was carrying her away from the carcass, the rest of the pack moved. The 6 that had been holding at the streambed edge pressed forward. The three on the left closed the arc. The two on the right tightened their angle. By the time the tiger checked her charge and turned back, the pack had redistributed around her. She was no longer standing over her kill with a clear field in front of her. She was surrounded on three sides by animals that were not attacking her, but were not leaving either. The vocalizations had changed now. The dholes were calling in that distinctive high-pitched chittering way, overlapping calls that researchers believe serve to maintain spatial awareness within the pack during high-intensity interactions. From the tiger's perspective, this is noise coming from every direction simultaneously. It is disorienting. It is relentless. It is designed to be. She charged again, this time to the right, where two dholes had crept closest. Again they split and ran, but again the movement of the rest of the pack compensated. She turned to charge a third time, this time directly at the group near the carcass, and two of them did not run immediately. They held for a fraction of a second longer than the others had, long enough to make her hesitate, long enough for the rest of the pack to close further. When they finally broke and ran, they ran in different directions, which meant her charge had no single clean target. There are accounts of tigers killing dholes during these confrontations. It does happen. A tiger is perfectly capable of catching and killing a dhole if the geometry is right, if one individual is isolated and the tiger is already moving with full commitment. Dholes that are careless in these situations die. The pack knows this. The individuals in the pack have been doing this long enough, have been socialized into pack behavior deeply enough, that their movements during a confrontation like this carry the weight of accumulated experience. They are not reckless. They are precise. The tiger made 4 more direct charges over a period that observers estimated at somewhere between 40 minutes and an hour. Each charge was met with the same response. The targeted individual ran. The rest of the pack did not. The pressure was constant and it came from everywhere. She was expending enormous energy. She was not landing on anything. The carcass, which she had already fed from substantially, but which still contained a considerable amount of meat, was no longer accessible to her because the pack had physically positioned itself around it. Every time she moved toward it, she was moving toward multiple dholes simultaneously, which meant multiple directions of response. At some point, the calculation changed for her. The point at which a predator decides that the cost of maintaining a position has exceeded the value of what it is protecting is not a conscious decision in the way a human would make it. It is something more immediate, a shift in the balance of arousal and threat response that tips the animal toward withdrawal. For the tiger, that point came approximately an hour after the pack arrived. She moved, not a charge this time, a withdrawal. She turned away from the carcass and walked, in that stiff, deliberate way that large cats walk when they are doing something under protest, into the denser cover to the north of the stream bed. The pack fed. This in itself would be a remarkable enough event to report. A pack of dholes displacing a Bengal tiger from a fresh kill is not common. It has been recorded before, in various parts of the dhole's range across South and Southeast Asia, but it is never routine. Each instance represents a significant test of pack cohesion and individual nerve. The fact that it happened cleanly, without serious injury to any pack member, without the tiger managing to kill or seriously wound any of the dholes, speaks to the quality of this particular pack's coordination. But the story does not end there. The tiger did not go far. Large cats do not easily abandon a kill of that magnitude. The sambar had been substantial. Even after her feeding sessions, there was significant meat remaining. She rested in cover to the north, and she waited. Dholes do not feed slowly. This is one of the adaptive advantages that comes with pack hunting and pack feeding. When a dhole pack arrives at food, they consume it fast. This is not greed, it is strategy. Or rather, it is behavior that natural selection has shaped over vast stretches of time, because groups that eat fast lose less to competitors and scavengers than groups that eat slowly. Vultures will have been gathering in the trees overhead within an hour of the pack arriving at the carcass. Jackals will have been circling at the edges. The smell of opened carcass in forest air draws everything. The dholes fed intensively, and they fed in rotation, some eating while others kept peripheral watch and then switching. This is another aspect of the pack's coordination that is easy to overlook in the drama of the confrontation with the tiger. They were not purely focused on the tiger. They were managing a complex, multi-party resource competition simultaneously. By early afternoon, the pack had consumed a substantial portion of what remained on the carcass. Dhole digestive physiology is adapted to high volumes of rapid consumption, and 11 hungry animals working through a large sambar carcass can reduce it considerably in just a few hours. Individual animals moved off to rest in shade at the edges of the clearing, their bellies visibly distended. The pack's energy level dropped, as it always does after a major feed. They were not on high alert. The confrontation was over, or so the resting dholes believed. The tiger came back in the early evening. She came from the north, from the dense cover where she had been resting. She came quickly and with purpose, moving in a direct line toward the carcass at the kind of low, committed pace that means a tiger has decided something. Several of the resting dholes detected her approach before she reached the clearing edge. The alert behavior moved through the pack fast. Animals that had been deeply rested were on their feet within seconds. The coordination that had dispersed during the rest period reassembled with a speed that is genuinely impressive to witness. Pack animals, social carnivores with deep bonds and constant communication, do not take long to reorganize under threat. The muscle memory of the confrontation earlier in the day was, in some sense, still active. The tiger reached the edge of the clearing and found the pack already between her and what remained of the carcass. Not in the same positions as before, not arranged identically, because the pack is adaptive and the situation had changed. Some of her previous approach paths were now occupied. The animals had not arranged themselves deliberately in response to her specific approach vector. The dholes had simply placed themselves around the resource they were guarding, as pack animals do, and by doing so they had covered the relevant approaches. She made 2 quick charges to probe the pack's response. Both times the targeted animals moved correctly. Both times the pack absorbed the charge and reformed. She pushed harder on the 3rd charge than she had during any charge in the morning confrontation, making full contact with a dhole that had not cleared quite fast enough. The animal was knocked over. It scrambled back to its feet. It was not seriously hurt, but it was a demonstration of what the tiger is capable of when she closes the gap even fractionally. The rest of the pack's response to that contact was immediate. Vocalizations intensified. 3 animals that had been holding wide converged toward the tiger's position. The tiger turned to face them. Behind her, 2 others closed in from the direction she had come from. This is the geometry that makes the dhole strategy work. A tiger attacking in one direction creates opportunity from every other direction. The individual that absorbs the attack, if it survives, creates a moment in which the attacking tiger's attention and momentum are committed in one place. The pack exploits the gap that commitment creates. It is not a passive strategy. It is not a strategy of simply absorbing punishment and hoping the tiger tires. It is an active, dynamic exploitation of the fundamental limitation of solo predators, which is that they can only be fully focused in one direction at a time. The evening confrontation lasted longer than the morning one. The tiger was more motivated, having rested and allowed her hunger to rebuild, and she pushed harder and more persistently. She made at least 11 separate charges over a period that lasted into the early dark. The dholes sustained the pressure. Individual animals were rotated off the most exposed positions as fatigue or risk increased, replaced by others who had been holding at less stressful points on the perimeter. This rotation, this fluid redistribution of where the pressure was being applied and who was carrying it, is one of the most sophisticated aspects of dhole pack behavior in confrontational situations. She did not get to the carcass, not that evening. She withdrew again as the forest darkened, and this time she went further. The observers who had been tracking both the tiger and the pack from a safe distance noted that she moved off to the east, crossing the dry stream bed and entering a different drainage to the one she had been using as her rest site during the day. She was not simply retreating to nearby cover to wait again. She was putting distance between herself and the situation. The pack fed again through the night, consuming what little remained of the sambar. By the time the sun was fully up on the 2nd day, there was very little of consequence left on the carcass. The major structural bones had been cracked by the dhole's powerful jaws, which is another often overlooked capability of this animal. Dholes can crack bones that many larger carnivores cannot. Their jaw structure is adapted for it, another edge in the relentless efficiency of their feeding strategy. And then, the following morning, the tiger came back. This is the detail that elevates this event from remarkable to extraordinary. Not the first confrontation, not the first displacement, but the return. The fact that the tiger came back the next morning means she had not been permanently deterred. She was testing the situation again, hoping, in whatever way large cats hope, that the pack had moved on, that the dynamic had changed, that the odds had shifted back in her favor. Tigers are persistent animals. They are not animals that give up easily on a resource they have invested in. She had killed that sambar. It was hers, by every rule of the individual predator's world. She was not wrong to come back and test again. The pack was still there. They had rested in and around the clearing through the night, full from feeding but not fully dispersed. Dhole packs, when they have a resource to protect or when they feel settled in a location, do not immediately move on after a major feed. They rest nearby. Social bonds are reinforced during these rest periods. The pack is a living entity during these hours as much as during the hunt, animals lying in contact with each other, engaging in the mutual grooming and soft vocalizations that maintain cohesion. 11 animals that have just been through an intense confrontation with a tiger and then fed enormously have both the physical fullness and the social motivation to stay where they are. So when the tiger arrived on the second morning, the scene was in some ways a mirror of the first, but the dynamics had shifted in small and important ways. The tiger was returning to a situation she had already tested and failed to resolve. She had information about this pack now. She had experienced their coordination, felt the geometry of their pressure, understood at some instinctive level that the charges she had been making were not achieving what charges are supposed to achieve. There is evidence from studies of large carnivore behavior that previous experience with specific competitors shapes subsequent decision-making in ways that go beyond simple conditioning. The tiger was not naive. She knew what she was walking back into. The pack, conversely, had also been through the confrontation. They had successfully held the position twice. They had fed. Their energy reserves, which had been depleted by the extended high-intensity standoff of the previous day, had been substantially restored by their massive feeding session. A pack of dholes that is well-fed is a different proposition from a pack that is hungry, not because hunger makes them timid, it doesn't, but because satiety means they have no desperate need to fight for additional food. What they are defending this morning is not food. The carcass is largely consumed. It is territory and the principle of the position. And packs of social carnivores are capable of defending principles in ways that individual predators are not. The second morning's confrontation was shorter than the first. Whether because the tiger had genuinely recalibrated her assessment of this pack's willingness to hold, or because the carcass was sufficiently depleted that the reward had dropped below the threshold that made the cost worthwhile, is impossible to say with certainty. Perhaps it was both. The tiger made several probing approaches. The pack responded with the same distributed mobile pressure as before. She made 2 charges. Neither landed. She stopped. She stood at the edge of the stream bed for a period that observers described as strikingly long, a tiger simply standing and reading a situation, not committing to either charge or withdrawal, processing something, and then she turned and walked away. Steadily, without rushing, with the particular contained dignity of an animal that has not been broken, but has been beaten. She did not return to the site. There are several things about this sequence of events that deserve close attention because they illuminate aspects of both species that are easy to misunderstand. The first is about the tiger's behavior and what it does not mean. The tiger's withdrawal is not evidence of weakness or deficiency. She is one of the most formidable predators on the planet. Her retreats were not the retreats of an animal that was outmatched in any absolute physical sense. A tiger in good health and fighting with full commitment against a single Dhole would kill it without difficulty. 2 Dholes, still no contest. The tiger's problem was never capability. It was coverage. She could not be simultaneously powerful in all directions, and the Dhole's strategy was specifically designed to exploit that limitation. Understanding this is important because it reframes what we mean by dominance in the wild. Dominance is not an intrinsic property of an individual animal. It is a relationship between a set of capabilities and a set of circumstances. Change the circumstances, and dominance changes. The second thing worth examining is the Dhole's relationship with risk. Every individual Dhole in that pack was at genuine risk during those confrontations. The animal that was knocked over by the tiger's charge on the second evening could have been seriously injured or killed. Others had close escapes that observers noted, but that are harder to quantify in retrospect. The pack's ability to sustain that level of risk, to keep animals in exposed positions under genuine threat from one of the world's most powerful predators, is a direct product of social bonding. Animals that are deeply bonded to each other, animals that have hunted together, fed together, raised pups together, are willing to expose themselves to a level of individual risk that a solitary animal would never accept. The pack functions as an extension of the individual self. An individual Dhole facing a tiger alone would run, correctly. The same animal in a pack does not run, not because it has stopped being afraid, but because the pack changes the mathematics of what running means. The third thing is about what this event tells us about competition between apex predators in shared landscapes. Dholes and tigers are not always in direct competition. Their relationships in natural systems are complex and variable. There are habitats where they coexist with minimal direct conflict, partitioning resources in ways that reduce confrontation. There are habitats where competition is direct and regular. In India's forests, the relationship between these two species has been shaped by millennia of coevolution, and both sides carry the behavioral adaptations that reflect that history. The tiger's ability to kill dholes when the geometry is right is real. The dhole pack's ability to displace a tiger when its coordination is at its highest is equally real. Neither species has found a permanent solution to the other, because natural selection doesn't work that way. It produces ongoing dynamic tension, not permanent resolution. The dhole as a species has had a troubled recent history that is important to understand in the context of events like this. They are listed as endangered by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. Their numbers have declined precipitously over the past century, driven by loss of habitat, prey-based depletion, persecution by humans who have historically viewed them as competitors for livestock, and disease. The total wild population is estimated at somewhere between 2,200 and 3,300 individuals, which makes this species rarer than it often appears in wildlife documentaries, where the visual drama of pack hunts can create an impression of abundance that the actual numbers do not support. This matters because what we are watching when we watch a dhole pack drive a Bengal tiger off a kill is not just a thrilling piece of predator behavior. It is a glimpse of something that exists in diminishing pockets of wild habitat, a system of carnivore interaction that has been shaped over evolutionary time, and that requires both species to be present in sufficient numbers and with sufficient habitat connectivity to actually function. When dholes disappear from a landscape, the consequences are not limited to the absence of dholes. The whole structure of how prey populations are managed, how kills are competed for, how resources move through the carnivore community, shifts. The tiger-dhole interaction is not a footnote to the ecology of Indian forests. It is part of the fabric. The dhole's hunting capabilities in their own right are worth dwelling on, because it would be a mistake to understand this species purely through the lens of its interactions with tigers. The dhole is, on its own ecological merits, one of Asia's most effective large predators. Pack hunts by danged dholes are relentless. They are endurance-based, like the hunts of African wild dogs, which represent a parallel evolutionary solution to the same problem of how small to medium-sized social carnivores can take prey vastly larger than themselves. Dholes will pursue prey over distances of several kilometers, maintaining a pace that prey animals cannot sustain indefinitely. The pack works in relay, with fresher individuals taking over the leading pursuit position as others fall back to recover. The prey, crucially, never gets this luxury. It must run continuously, carrying the full weight of its exertion, while the pack distributes the cost across multiple bodies. A sambar stag, which can weigh over 200 kilograms, is realistic prey for a dhole pack. There are records of packs attempting adult gaur, though the success rate against a full-grown gaur is low. Deer of various species form the core of the dhole's diet across most of its range, and the efficiency with which a pack can locate, pursue, pull down, and consume a large deer is extraordinary. The speed of consumption, which has already been mentioned in the context of the competition with the tiger, serves multiple functions. It reduces the window during which competitors can interrupt the feeding. It reduces the time the pack spends in an exposed and potentially vulnerable state around a carcass. And it means that if competition does arrive in the form of a tiger, the pack has usually already secured a substantial portion of the nutritional value of the kill before the confrontation begins. The communication system that underpins all of this is still not fully understood. Dholes produce a range of vocalizations that includes a whistling call, unlike anything produced by other wild dogs, a range of high-pitched yipping and chittering calls used during coordinated activity, lower growls and snarls used in close-quarters confrontation, and a variety of postures and body language signals. Researchers working with the species have noted that communication during hunts and during confrontations with other predators appears to carry more information than simple coordination. There are suggestions in the literature that dholes are capable of something resembling tactical communication, signals that convey not just the presence of a threat, but something about its position and nature. This is contentious. The evidence is observational and anecdotal rather than experimentally verified. But anyone who has watched a dhole pack in action has the persistent impression that these animals are talking to each other in ways that go beyond simple proximity signals. The pups of a dhole pack are raised communally. This is worth mentioning because it has direct implications for the pack structure that makes confrontations like the tiger displacement possible. In a communally rearing pack, multiple adults are involved in provisioning and protecting the young. Adults that are not the primary breeding pair will carry food back to the den, will guard pups while others hunt, and will play with and socially engage the young animals. This investment by the whole group in the next generation creates bonds that go deeper than simple familiarity. The Dholes in a pack are not just colleagues. They are family in the fullest biological sense of that word, and the mutual investment that characterizes their relationship with each other's offspring produces the kind of cohesion that allows individuals to hold their position 3 meters from a Bengal tiger. The forest itself is a character in this story, not just a backdrop. The dry stream bed where the sambar carcass lay is the kind of feature that structures animal movement through this type of habitat. Water, even absent water in the form of a dry seasonal stream, creates corridors through the forest. Animals use these corridors because the vegetation at their edges tends to be denser and more varied than the mid-forest canopy, offering both cover and feeding opportunities. Prey animals drink at water sources when they are flowing and move along them as movement corridors when they are dry. Predators know this. The tiger almost certainly made her kill near the stream bed because she had intercepted the sambar along this corridor. The Dholes found the carcass following a scent trail that the dry air and open stream bed had allowed to carry further than it might have in denser vegetation. The open structure of the stream bed clearing also shaped the confrontation. A more enclosed environment, dense bamboo thicket for instance, would have disadvantaged the Dhole pack considerably. Their strategy depends on mobility, on the ability to spread out and circle and approach from multiple directions simultaneously. Dense vegetation collapses those distances and limits the ability to maintain a distributed formation. In a more open environment, the tiger's charges, while powerful, are more easily evaded because the fleeing animal has room to run and the pack has room to reform. The stream bed clearing was, almost accidentally, ideal terrain for the Dhole's approach. It is worth thinking about what the experience of these 2 days was like from the tiger's perspective, not in a sentimental or anthropomorphic way, but in the rigorous ethological sense of trying to understand what the sensory and motivational experience of an animal under these conditions actually involves. Tigers are not social animals. They have not evolved the tolerance for the close proximity of other large bodies that characterizes pack animals. A tiger confronted by 11 Dholes is dealing not just with a competitive threat to a resource, but with something that violates, on a very deep level, its normal relationship with space and territory. Tigers mark and defend large territories, specifically to avoid the kind of situation they were being forced into here, the situation of having multiple animals pressing their space from multiple directions simultaneously. This is profoundly unsettling for a solitary territorial predator in a way that it is not for a pack animal, for whom crowded, intense, close proximity social interaction is simply normal life. The tiger's persistence, her willingness to come back twice, to keep testing the situation, reflects a motivation that is equally deep and real. A large sambar kill represents days of feeding. For a female tiger, who must maintain sufficient body condition to support potential pregnancy and cub rearing, losing a major kill entirely is a non-trivial cost. She was not coming back out of stubbornness or wounded pride, though those are concepts that fit human narratives better than animal ones. She was coming back because the caloric value of what she had killed was enormous, and the instinct to retain what one has killed is powerful and ancient. Her decision to finally withdraw on the second morning was not an emotional defeat. It was the outcome of a calculation, arrived at through the accumulated experience of 2 days of confrontation, that the cost of continued effort had exceeded what recovery of the remaining resource could justify. This is adaptive decision-making. It is the kind of flexible, context-sensitive assessment of cost and benefit that separates animals that survive difficult environments from animals that do not. The tiger was making the right decision. A tiger that continued to throw itself at a coordinated pack of 11 Dholes indefinitely, regardless of the cost in energy and risk of injury, would not be a tiger that lived long. The withdrawal is not failure in any evolutionary sense. It is intelligence. And yet the Dholes won. That is also true. On 2 consecutive mornings, in the same patch of Indian forest, a pack of animals that weigh between 12 and 20 kilograms each drove off an animal that weighs over 200 kilograms and is capable of